The rain came down in sheets, cold and merciless as judgment itself, soaking through Alara Ashford's thin cloak until it clung to her skin like a burial shroud. She knelt in the mud outside the pack house gates, her swollen belly pressed against her thighs, 6 months of pregnancy making every position uncomfortable, every breath a labor. The eviction notice clutched in her trembling fingers had dissolved into pulp, the ink bleeding across the page until the words were barely legible, but she'd already memorized every cruel syllable. 3 days to vacate the healer's cottage. All possessions seized for debt repayment. Amount owed, 30,000 silver marks, plus interest compounding daily. 30,000 marks. She'd never seen that much money in her entire life. The council had assessed it as damages after the trial. Compensation for the Luna's death, they'd claimed. Though no amount of silver could bring back Catherine or her child, the sum had been designed to be impossible, a debt meant to crush rather than compensate. Her wolf stirred weakly in the back of her mind, a shadow of what she'd once been, whimpering with exhaustion and despair. The creature had fallen silent months ago when the accusation started, when Luna Catherine lost her baby, and the pack's grief needed somewhere to land. Alara had been the easiest target, the healer who'd attended the Luna in her final trimester, who'd prepared the teas and tonics, who'd been present when Catherine's screams echoed through the temple as her womb emptied itself of life. They'd called her poisoner, murderer, worse things in the dark. Elder Moira had stripped her of her healing mark in front of the entire pack, the silver brand on her wrist burning as the magic was forcibly extracted, leaving only a twisted scar. "You are banished from the temple," the elder had pronounced, her voice carrying across the assembly ground. "You are forbidden from practicing the healing arts. You are cast out from the grace of the moon goddess until such time as you prove your innocence, if such proof exists." What they didn't know, what Alara had never told anyone, was that her deepest gift couldn't be stripped away. The ability to trace magical signatures through flesh and bone, to read the memory that lingered in old stone and ancient wood. She'd sensed the true killer's corruption in Catherine's blood that night, had felt the wrongness like poison against her own soul. But who would believe a disgraced healer's accusations against someone powerful? She'd been too afraid to speak, too broken to fight. It didn't exist, they said. How could she prove a negative, prove she hadn't done something? And Marcus Silvermane, the man who'd shared her bed, who'd whispered promises against her skin, who'd planted this child in her womb, had stood in the crowd with his face carefully blank, offering no defense, no support. He'd turned away when her eyes found his, melting into the mass of bodies as though he'd never known her name. She'd heard later that he'd fled the territory entirely, vanishing the same night Luna Catherine died, as if he'd known what was coming, as if his seduction of Alara had been part of something larger and darker that she couldn't yet comprehend. That had been 4 months ago. 4 months of watching her savings vanish into the hands of debt collectors, of selling every possession she owned, of taking cleaning work in the pack house kitchens for scraps and copper pennies. 4 months of whispers following her through the market, of mothers pulling their children away when she passed, of her own isolation becoming a physical weight that pressed down on her shoulders until she wanted to curl into the earth and disappear. The baby kicked against her ribs, a flutter of movement that brought tears to her eyes. This child was innocent. This child deserved better than a disgraced mother with empty pockets and an emptier future. "Still here?" The voice came from above, sharp with contempt. Alara looked up through the rain to find Beta Thomas standing on the other side of the iron gates, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "I told you yesterday, the Alpha doesn't see petitioners without appointment. Especially not." His lip curled as his gaze dropped to her belly. "Especially not your kind." Her kind. Fallen. Disgraced. Untouchable. "I'm not asking for an audience," Alara said, her voice hoarse from disuse. She'd barely spoken to anyone in days. I just need to know if there's work. Any work. I can scrub floors, haul water, anything. The pack house doesn't employ criminals, Thomas interrupted. Alpha Marcus has made his position clear. You're lucky you haven't been driven out of Packlands entirely. His eyes glittered with something ugly. Though I hear the debt collectors are handling that nicely, where will you go when they take the cottage? Into the rogue lands? With a bastard child and winter coming? The words should have hurt. Probably would have, if she had any feeling left inside her beyond the hollow ache of survival. Instead, she simply looked at him, meeting his gaze with the exhausted dignity of someone who had nothing left to lose. Thank you for your time, Beta, she said quietly, and pushed herself to her feet with effort, one hand braced against her lower back. The baby had grown more active this week, pressing against her spine and ribs, and every movement sent aching protests through her overtaxed muscles. She needed to figure out where to go, what to do. The cottage would be emptied tomorrow. The collectors had promised to arrive at dawn, and they were nothing if not punctual. Perhaps she could find shelter in the forest, build some kind of lean-to against the weather. Perhaps she could make it to the neutral territories, throw herself on the mercy of one of the smaller packs that didn't know her name or her shame. Perhaps she could simply lie down in the rain and let the cold take her. No. The thought rose fierce and immediate, her wolf stirring with a flash of protective fury. No. She would not give them that satisfaction. She would not let this child suffer because the world had decided Alara Ashford was guilty of crimes she didn't commit. She turned away from the pack house, pulling her sodden cloak tighter around her shoulders, and started the long walk back toward the cottage. Her feet squelched in the mud with every step. Water ran into her eyes, or maybe those were tears. She couldn't tell anymore, couldn't distinguish between the rain and the grief. The sound of engines cut through the steady drum of rainfall. Alara glanced over her shoulder and froze. A motorcade was approaching along the main road, 3 black vehicles with tinted windows and the royal crest emblazoned on their doors in silver and gold. The Alpha King's convoy. She'd heard he was touring the territories this month, inspecting packlands and settling disputes, but she hadn't expected him to pass through their remote corner of the realm. She should move, should get out of the way, make herself invisible as someone of her status was expected to do in the presence of royalty. But her body felt locked in place, rooted to the muddy road as the vehicle slowed and then stopped just a few feet from where she stood. The rear door of the center vehicle opened. Alpha King Dante Valewood stepped out into the rain, and Alara's breath caught in her throat despite herself. She'd seen him before, years ago, when he'd visited the Healing Temple to honor the fallen warriors of the Border Wars. He'd been impressive then, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the deadly grace of a predator, but distance and ceremony had softened the impact. Up close, with only a few feet of rain-soaked air between them, he was overwhelming. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his body a study in controlled power beneath the formal black coat that hung open over a dark shirt. His hair was black as midnight, pushed back from a face that would have been beautiful if not for the 3 parallel scars that ran from his right temple down across his cheek to his jaw. Claw marks, long healed but never fully faded. They gave him a savage quality, a reminder that beneath the crown and the civilized veneer lived something wild and dangerous. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. They were gray as storm clouds, intense and ancient, carrying a weight that seemed to press against her skin even from a distance. Those eyes swept over her now, taking in her soaked cloak, her swollen belly, her muddy knees from where she'd been kneeling, and something flickered in their depths. Something that looked almost like recognition, though that was impossible. The Alpha King didn't know her name. He took a step forward, his nostrils flaring slightly as he inhaled. His hand came up, one finger extended as though he might reach for her, and then he stopped. His entire body went rigid, muscles locking, that gray gaze suddenly blazing with golden light that burst through the irises like sunrise. Ilara felt it in the same moment, a warmth that started at her breastbone and spread outward like liquid heat, filling her chest, racing down her arms, pooling in her belly around the child. Her wolf, silent and dormant for months, suddenly surged to life with a keening whimper that echoed through her entire being. Mate. No, no, that couldn't be right. She must be delirious from cold and hunger. Must be imagining the way the world seemed to narrow down to the space between them, the way every instinct in her body screamed to move closer, to touch him, to... The Alpha King's hand clenched into a fist at his side. A low growl rumbled from his chest, so deep she felt it in her bones. The scars on his face seemed to pulse with silvery light, and when he spoke, his voice came out rough, barely controlled. "What is your name?" She shouldn't answer, should bow, should apologize for existing in his path, should vanish before this moment could become anything more dangerous than it already was. But his eyes held her pinned, and her mouth moved before her mind could catch up. "Ilara," she whispered. "Ilara Ashford." Something fierce and possessive flashed across his scarred features. He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could smell him, pine and musk and something darker, something that made her wolf whine with longing. His hand lifted again, and this time he didn't stop, his fingers extending toward her face. She flinched. The movement was instinctive, born of months of cruelty, and she hated herself for it the moment it happened. But the Alpha King froze, his hand hanging in the air between them, and the expression that crossed his face was something like pain. "Who hurt you?" The question came out soft, deadly. "Give me their names." Ilara shook her head, unable to form words. This was madness. This was impossible. The mate bond didn't activate like this, didn't strike like lightning between strangers on a muddy road. And even if it did, even if this overwhelming pull was real, she had nothing to offer an Alpha King. She was disgraced, pregnant with another man's child, drowning in debt and accusations. "The debt," she heard herself say, her voice cracking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to block your path, I was just..." She gestured vaguely toward the packhouse gates, toward her life falling apart in slow motion. "The debt collectors come tomorrow. I don't know where to go." The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "How much?" 30,000 marks. The number tasted like ash. "Plus interest. I can't. There's no way to. I'll pay it." 3 words, spoken with absolute certainty, and Ilara's world tilted sideways. She stared at him, searching for the trap, the cruel joke, the catch that would turn this moment into one more humiliation. "Why?" she breathed. His gaze held hers, gray shot through with gold, ancient and hungry and unbearably intense. "Because I can. Because you need it. Because..." He stopped, jaw working, and when he continued, his voice had dropped to something raw and honest. "Because when you smile, I want to be the reason." Ilara's hand flew to her mouth, a sob catching in her throat. She couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled. Couldn't imagine finding joy again in a world that had taken everything from her. But standing in the rain, meeting the Alpha King's scarred and beautiful face, feeling the impossible warmth of the mate bond singing through her veins, for the first time in months, she felt something dangerously close to hope. The Alpha King's scarred hand extended toward her, palm up, an offering rather than a command. Ilara stared at it through the rain, her mind reeling from his words, from the impossible promise he'd just made. 30,000 marks, a sum that would have taken her years to earn, spoken as casually as if he were offering her shelter from the storm. "Come," he said, and his voice held that same rough quality, as though something inside him was straining against leash and collar. "You're soaking through. We need to get you warm." She shouldn't take his hand. Every shred of self-preservation that remained intact screamed at her to step back, to refuse, to not let herself be pulled into whatever this was. Men didn't offer miracles without expecting payment, and she had nothing left to give. Nothing except. Her wolf surged forward again, pushing against the walls of her consciousness with desperate urgency. The creature had been silent for so long that its sudden vitality felt almost foreign, overwhelming. "Mate," it whispered again, the word resonating through every cell of her body. "Safe. Home. Mate." Alara's fingers trembled as she lifted her hand. The moment her palm touched his, the world exploded into sensation. Heat bloomed from the point of contact, spreading up her arm in waves that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with recognition. Her breath caught as the warmth settled in her chest, wrapping around her heart like molten gold, pulsing in time with her racing pulse. The bond, because that's what it was, undeniable now, thrummed between them like a living thing, a tether made of starlight and ancient magic. Through it, she felt him. The barely leashed power that made the air around him shimmer with authority. The loneliness that ran deep as marrow, centuries of it accumulated like sediment in the soul. And beneath it all, something fierce and possessive and hungry that made her wolf keen with answering need. Alpha King Dante's fingers closed around hers, his grip careful despite the visible tension in his shoulders. His eyes had gone completely gold, the gray consumed by the glow of his wolf rising to the surface. She watched his pupils dilate, watched his nostrils flare as he inhaled deeply, scenting her. A growl built in his chest, low and resonant, vibrating through their joined hands. The scars on his face blazed with silvery light, like lightning trapped beneath skin. His jaw clenched, muscles jumping, and she realized with a shock that he was fighting for control, fighting himself. His free hand had curled into a fist so tight that his knuckles had gone white, and when he spoke, his voice came out barely human. "Ilara?" Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse tangled together. "Do you feel it?" She nodded, unable to form words. How could she not feel it? The bond was everywhere, in everything, rewriting her understanding of reality with each passing second. Her wolf had never been this present, this alive, even before the disgrace. The creature prowled just beneath her skin, desperate to manifest, to claim and be claimed. But she was pregnant with another man's child, disgraced, accused of murder. What kind of moon goddess would bind an alpha king to someone like her? What kind of cruel joke was this? "I don't understand," she whispered, and hated how broken she sounded. "This can't be real. You're you're the alpha king. I'm nobody. I'm worse than nobody. I'm mine." The word came out as a snarl, and his grip tightened fractionally before he forced himself to gentle it again. "You are mine, Alara Ashford. The bond doesn't lie. Whatever else has happened, whatever accusations have been thrown at you, the moon goddess herself has declared you worthy of standing at my side." Tears burned behind her eyes. She wanted to believe him. Goddess. She wanted it with a desperation that terrified her. But the last 4 months had taught her that wanting something didn't make it true, and hope was the cruelest torture of all. "The child," she managed, placing her free hand over her swollen belly. "It's not yours. I'm carrying another man's. It's yours." His eyes blazed brighter. "That's all that matters. Any child you carry is under my protection. Anyone who would use this innocent life against you will answer to me personally." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of pine and musk that made her dizzy. And if you think for one moment that I would turn away my mate because of circumstances beyond your control, then you don't yet know what you mean to me. I don't know you at all, she breathed, but couldn't bring herself to pull away. The bond sang between them, urging her closer, promising safety and shelter and things she didn't dare name. A muscle ticked in his jaw. No, but you will. He tugged gently on her hand, drawing her toward the open car door. For now, let me get you out of this rain. Let me deal with your debts. Let me give you time to breathe without drowning. Beta Thomas had appeared at the pack house gates, his mouth hanging open in shock as he took in the scene. Other pack members were gathering behind him, drawn by the sight of the royal motorcade and their alpha king standing in the rain with the disgraced healer. Alara felt their stares like physical weight, heard the whispers starting already, saw the confusion and speculation spreading through the crowd. This would make everything worse. Being seen with the Alpha King, accepting his help, would only add fuel to the rumors. They'd call her whore, seductress, accuse her of using dark magic to ensnare royalty. As if sensing her thoughts, Dante shifted his body to block her from view, his broad shoulders creating a wall between her and the crowd. Ignore them, he said quietly, for her ears alone. They don't matter. Only you matter. She looked up at him, searching his scarred face for any hint of deception or ulterior motive. But his expression held only fierce certainty, the kind of absolute conviction that came from a man who'd never had to question his own power or purpose. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would you do this for a stranger? Something ancient and knowing flickered in his golden eyes. You're not a stranger, Ilara. Not to me. Not anymore. He lifted their joined hands, pressing her palm against his chest where she could feel his heart racing beneath the layers of fabric. Do you feel that? That's recognition. That's the bond telling us what our conscious minds haven't fully accepted yet. We were meant for this moment. Meant for each other. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as though even the unborn child could sense the significance of what was happening. Ilara gasped at the sudden movement, her free hand flying to her belly. Dante's gaze dropped immediately, tracking the motion with intense focus. Are you hurt? Is something wrong? No, just, the baby moves sometimes, especially when I'm stressed or... She broke off, suddenly aware of how intimate this was, how strange to be discussing her pregnancy with a man she'd met mere minutes ago. Even if that man was her mate. Even if every instinct she possessed was screaming that this was right, that this was safe, that this was home. May I? His hand hovered over hers, not quite touching, waiting for permission. She should say no, should maintain some kind of boundary, some protection against the way he was already slipping past her defenses with terrifying ease. But her mouth betrayed her, whispering, yes. His palm settled over her hand, large and warm, covering both her fingers and the swell of her belly beneath. For a long moment, he simply held still, his expression intent as he waited. Then the baby kicked again, a solid thump against their joined hands, and something fierce and tender transformed his scarred features. Strong, he murmured, wonder threading through his voice. This child has a warrior's spirit. Fresh tears spilled down Ilara's cheeks, mingling with the rain. Marcus had never wanted to feel the baby move, had pulled away whenever she tried to share those moments, as though her pregnancy was something shameful to be hidden rather than celebrated. But this man, this Alpha King who owed her nothing, who'd known her for mere heartbeats, looked at her growing child with reverence. Please, she whispered, not even sure what she was asking for. Safety, shelter, a moment to believe that the world could still hold kindness. Please don't let this be a lie. Dante's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears with devastating gentleness. I swear to you on my crown, on my life, on everything I am, I will not let you fall. Not now. Not ever. The debts are already gone. I made a phone call while you were deciding whether to take my hand. Every collector, every creditor, every person who held your past over your head, they've been paid in full with interest. You are free, Ilara. No one owns your future but you. She couldn't process it, couldn't wrap her mind around the casual way he spoke of erasing her crushing burden, as though it were nothing, as though she were worth such extravagance. I can't repay you, she said, her voice breaking. I have nothing to give in return. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, his touch impossibly tender for a man with a warrior's hands. Then give me what I asked for. When you're ready, when you feel safe enough, when the weight has lifted enough that joy becomes possible again, smile for me, Ilara. Just once. That will be payment enough. The request was so simple it felt dangerous. So small it terrified her more than any demand for money or service or body, because a smile required hope, and hope was the one thing she couldn't afford to feel. Hope was what would destroy her when this dream inevitably shattered. But looking into his eyes, feeling the bond pulse warm and constant between them, sensing his absolute sincerity through the connection that had woven itself into her soul, she found herself nodding. Come, he said again, and this time she let him guide her into the car without protest. The interior was warm and dry, leather seats that cradled her exhausted body like an embrace. Dante slid in beside her, keeping careful space between them even as the bond pulled taut with wanting. As the door closed and the motorcade began to move, Ilara caught one last glimpse of Beta Thomas and the gathered crowd. Their faces were studies in shock and confusion, unable to comprehend why their Alpha King would intervene for the pack's most reviled member. She should care about that. Should worry about the implications, the political ramifications, the way this would complicate everything. But wrapped in warmth for the first time in months, feeling the mate bond settle into something steady and real beneath her breastbone, all she could do was close her eyes and let herself breathe. The drive took them away from the pack house, away from the village, following winding roads that led deeper into the royal territories. Ilara watched through rain-streaked windows as familiar landmarks gave way to wilderness. Ancient forests, where the trees grew so thick that twilight reigned even at midday, clearings where wildflowers bloomed in defiance of the season. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. "My private estate," Dante replied. He'd removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders without asking, surrounding her in his scent. Not the royal pack house where every move is watched and reported. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can rest without eyes tracking your every breath. The thoughtfulness of it made her throat tight. "Won't people question why you've brought me there?" "Let them question." His tone carried an edge of steel. "I am Alpha King. I answer to no one regarding my choice of mate." Mate. The word hung between them, weighted with implications she wasn't ready to examine. "The bond," she started, then stopped, unsure how to voice the confusion swirling through her mind. "Does it always feel like this? So immediate? So consuming?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the window. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "I've lived 243 years, Ilara. I've seen true mate bonds form, watched them unfold over time. And I've never, not once, witnessed recognition this instant, this absolute." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his golden eyes stole her breath. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. When she binds souls together, it's because they're meant to complete each other, to heal what's broken and strengthen what's whole. But I'm not—" She gestured helplessly at herself, at her swollen belly and rain-soaked clothes, and the invisible weight of shame she carried. "I don't know how to be anyone's mate, especially not a king's. I can't even smile anymore. Then I'll wait. Simple words, simply spoken, but carrying absolute conviction. However long it takes. The estate emerged from the forest like something from a dream. Not the sprawling castle she'd expected, but a manor house built of warm stone and dark timber, with wide windows that glowed with welcoming light. Gardens surrounded it, meticulously maintained even in the rain, and beyond them she could see the dark line of forest stretching to the horizon. The car stopped beneath a covered portico, and Dante exited first, moving around to open her door with that same careful courtesy. This time, when he offered his hand, she took it without hesitation, letting him help her from the vehicle. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and she would have stumbled if not for his steady grip. "Easy," he murmured, his arm coming around her waist to support her weight. "When did you last eat?" The question caught her off guard. She couldn't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Food had become an afterthought when every copper penny needed to stretch toward paying debts that could never be satisfied. "I'm fine," she started to say, but her body betrayed her with a long, audible growl from her empty stomach. Dante's expression darkened. "Inside. Now. We'll get you fed and dry, and then you're going to rest." He guided her through massive oak doors into an entrance hall that managed to feel both grand and intimate. Warm wood paneling, thick carpets that muffled sound, artwork that spoke of age and care. Beneath her feet, she could feel the ancient stone humming with centuries of memories, her deeper gift stirring despite her fear, sensing the joy and sorrow and history trapped in every block of marble. She pushed the awareness away, afraid of what else she might sense in a place this old. A woman in a housekeeper's neat dress appeared from a side corridor, her eyes widening as she took in Alara's bedraggled state. "Your Majesty, I didn't realize you were bringing a guest." "This is Alara Ashford," Dante interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "My mate. She'll be staying in the West Wing. Please prepare the chambers there. Ensure they're stocked with everything she might need and bring food to her rooms within the hour." He paused, his hand tightening slightly at Alara's waist. "And Helen? No one enters that wing without her express permission. Not servants, not guards. No one. Is that understood?" The housekeeper's eyes went wide, but she dipped into a respectful curtsy. "Of course, Your Majesty. I'll see to it immediately." As Helen hurried away, Alara found her voice. "You don't have to, I don't need an entire wing. A room would be more than enough." "You need space." Dante began guiding her toward a sweeping staircase. Space to breathe, to heal, to simply exist without someone hovering over you. The West Wing has a sitting room, bedroom, bathroom, and a small library. It's yours. Private. Safe. The stairs seemed to stretch forever, each step requiring conscious effort. By the time they reached the second floor, Alara was breathing hard, her muscles screaming with exhaustion. Dante slowed his pace without comment, letting her lean more heavily against him. The West Wing corridor was lined with windows on one side, overlooking the gardens, and warm wood paneling on the other. At the far end, Dante opened a door into a suite of rooms that stole what remained of her breath. The sitting room was painted in soft creams and golds, with a fireplace already crackling with welcoming warmth. Beyond it, through an open doorway, she could see a bedroom with a bed that looked like a cloud, piled high with pillows and covered in thick quilts. Everything was clean, beautiful, and felt impossibly luxurious compared to the bare efficiency of her healer's cottage. "This is too much," she whispered. Dante guided her to an armchair near the fire, waiting until she'd sunk into its embrace before stepping back. "It's not enough," he countered. "But it's a start." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key, old brass, worn smooth with age, and pressed it into her palm. "This is yours, the only copy. As I said, no one enters without your permission." Ilara stared at the key, feeling its weight like a promise. Privacy, safety. Things she'd taken for granted once and thought she'd never have again. Why are you doing this? The question emerged raw, stripped of pretense. You don't know me. Don't know if I'm guilty of what they say. Don't know if I'm worth. Her voice cracked. Worth any of this. Dante crouched in front of her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. This close, she could see the faint silver threading through the scars on his face, could count the flecks of gray that still lingered in his golden eyes. I know the bond chose you, he said quietly. I know my wolf recognizes yours as mate. I know that in 243 years, I've never felt anything as certain as what I feel when I look at you. His scarred hand lifted slowly, giving her time to refuse, before settling over hers where it clutched the key. And I know that innocent people don't carry the kind of exhaustion I see in your eyes. Guilt doesn't look like grief, Ilara. Whatever happened, whoever accused you, I know you're not what they claim. You can't know that. But oh, how she wanted him to be right. I can. Because if you were capable of poisoning a pregnant woman, of murdering an unborn child, the moon goddess would never have bound you to me. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. Our goddess doesn't make mistakes, remember? Trust in that, even if you can't yet trust in me. A knock at the door made them both turn. Helen's voice came through the wood, respectful and distant. Your Majesty, I have food and clothing for the lady. Dante stood, his hand falling away from hers, and the loss of contact made her wolf whine softly. Leave everything outside the door, Helen. Thank you. He moved to retrieve the items himself, carrying in covered trays that smelled like heaven and a stack of soft clothing that looked to be in Ilara's size. He set them on a small table near her chair, then stepped back toward the door. You're leaving? The words escaped before she could stop them, and she hated the note of panic that crept into her voice. Dante paused, his hand on the doorframe, something raw and hungry flickering across his face, before he schooled it into careful neutrality. You need rest. And I need to not. He stopped, jaw clenching. The bond is new. The pull is strong. I won't risk making you uncomfortable by staying when you might feel obligated to tolerate my presence. She should let him go. Should take the space and safety he was offering and build walls around herself before she got too attached to this impossible situation. But her wolf was keening, desperate for him to stay, and the bond pulled taut with wanting. I notice you flinched earlier, Dante continued before she could speak, his voice going soft and deadly. When I reached for you, someone taught you to fear touch, taught you that a man's hands might bring pain. His eyes blazed gold again. I need you to know, Ilara. I will never be that person. I would cut off my own hands before I would raise them against you in anger. Do you understand? She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Good. He pulled the door open, then paused one more time. I'll be sleeping outside your door tonight. Not in the room. I won't invade your space. But close enough to respond if you need me. Close enough that my wolf can rest knowing you're safe. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with quiet finality. Ilara sat frozen for a long moment, staring at the space where he'd been, her mind struggling to process everything that had happened in the span of less than an hour. She'd gone from drowning in debt and despair to being claimed as mate to the Alpha King, from homeless to housed in luxury, from completely alone to having someone willing to sleep outside her door just to ensure her safety. It was too much, too fast, too impossible to be real. But the key in her hand was solid and tangible, and when she lifted Dante's coat to her face, breathing in his scent, her wolf settled with a contented rumble. Mate, the creature whispered again. Safe. Home. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to start believing in miracles again. Ilara woke to the sound of rain against the windows. though this rain felt different from the deluge that had soaked her the day before. This was gentler, a steady drumming that spoke of renewal rather than despair. For a moment she lay in the enormous bed, wrapped in sheets that smelled faintly of cedar and something warmer, something that made her wolf stir with contentment. Then reality crashed back. The Alpha King, the mate bond, the impossible situation she'd somehow fallen into. She sat up slowly, one hand pressed to her swollen belly where the baby kicked in response to her movement. 6 months along now, and the little one grew more active each day. A constant reminder of everything that had happened, everything she'd lost. No, she wouldn't think about Marcus this morning, wouldn't let the memories of his betrayal poison this strange new peace she'd found. The clothing Dante had left proved to be soft and practical when she examined it. Loose dresses in dark colors that would accommodate her pregnancy without drawing attention to it. Undergarments still wrapped in paper that suggested they'd been purchased specifically for her. The thought of him selecting these items, or ordering someone to do so with enough care to ensure her comfort, made something warm unfurl in her chest. She dressed slowly, taking time to wash her face in the basin Helen had left, filled with fresh water. The mirror above it showed a woman she barely recognized, hollow-eyed and too thin except for the pronounced curve of her belly, dark hair hanging limp and dull past her shoulders. When had she started looking so haunted? The memory of Dante's scarred face swam up, the intensity in his golden eyes as he'd told her she was innocent. The way he'd looked at her as though she were precious, as though the bond between them was a gift rather than a burden. She touched her neck where the phantom warmth of that bond still pulsed, a constant awareness of him somewhere nearby. Her wolf pushed forward, eager and insistent. "Want to see, mate?" the creature rumbled. "Need to see him safe." "He's fine," Ilara whispered to her reflection. "He's the Alpha King. Nothing can hurt him." But her wolf wasn't satisfied, and after a few minutes of internal argument, Ilara admitted defeat. She would check, just quickly, just to settle the restless creature inside her. The key Dante had given her unlocked the door with a soft click. She eased it open, not wanting to wake him if he'd actually spent the night out here as promised. He had. The enormous black wolf sprawled across the hallway floor lifted its head the moment her door cracked open, golden eyes fixing on her with immediate alertness. Even in wolf form, Dante radiated power and presence that made the air feel charged. His fur was darker than midnight, marked with the same silvery scars that decorated his human face, and he was easily twice the size of any wolf she'd ever seen. He didn't move as she stood there, just watched her with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. The bond between them hummed with his awareness, his careful restraint, his fierce protectiveness. "You actually stayed," she said softly, unnecessarily. "All night?" The wolf's ears flicked forward, and she felt his response through the bond even though he didn't shift to speak. Promised. Always keep promises to mate. Her throat tightened. Marcus had made promises too. Had whispered sweet words while slowly poisoning everything she cared about, setting her up to take the fall for his crimes. The thought of trusting another man's word, even one bound to her by fate itself, terrified her. But Dante had done nothing except keep his word so far, had given her space when he could have demanded closeness, had offered protection without asking for anything in return, except that impossible request. One smile. She realized she was standing in the doorway in her nightgown and bare feet, with the Alpha King in wolf form watching her with those luminous eyes, and suddenly felt ridiculous. "I should let you rest," she said, starting to retreat. The wolf rose fluidly to its feet, massive and magnificent, and the air shimmered. Between one breath and the next, Dante stood before her in human form, wearing loose sleep pants and nothing else. The scars that marked his face continued down his neck and across his chest. Silvery lines that spoke of battles survived and pain endured. His dark hair was sleep-tousled, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Did you need something? Are you well?" The genuine concern in his tone made her chest ache. When was the last time someone had asked if she was well and actually wanted to know the answer? "I'm fine," she said automatically, then reconsidered when his eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm... My wolf wanted to check on you. She wouldn't settle." Something blazed across his face. Pleasure and possessiveness and wonder all mixed together. "Your wolf wanted me?" Alara nodded, feeling heat climb her cheeks. The bond. It's still so new. She doesn't understand why we're separate. "Neither does mine," Dante admitted. He took a step closer, then stopped himself, that careful control sliding back into place. "But you need time, space. I understand that." "Do you?" She wasn't sure what made her ask. "Because you're the Alpha King. You could demand anything you wanted from me, and I'd have no choice but to comply." His expression went dark, dangerous in a way that should have frightened her, but instead made her wolf rumble with approval. "Is that what you think? That I'd use my position to force you?" "I don't know what to think." The words burst out of her, months of pain and betrayal rising to the surface. "Yesterday I was drowning, and today I'm standing in a palace wearing clothes you bought me, with the most powerful wolf in the kingdom looking at me like I'm something precious. It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense." Dante was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes searching her face. Then he spoke, each word measured and deliberate. "The Alpha King could demand many things, this is true, but your mate wants only what you're willing to give freely. Do you understand the difference?" She wanted to. Moon Goddess. She wanted to believe in that difference. "I'm trying," she whispered. "That's enough." He smiled, and it transformed his scarred face into something beautiful. "That's more than enough. Now you should eat breakfast. I'll have Helen bring something up." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I mean, I'd like to come down, to eat with others. I've been alone for so long and She broke off, not sure how to explain the hollow ache of isolation that had defined her existence for months. But Dante's expression softened with understanding. "Then you'll join me in the breakfast room. Give me 10 minutes to make myself presentable, and I'll escort you down." He was as good as his word. Exactly 10 minutes later, he returned to her door dressed in dark pants and a simple shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He offered her his arm with careful formality, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. The contact sent warmth flooding through the bond, her wolf purring with satisfaction at touching their mate. Dante's breath caught slightly, his fingers tightening over hers where they rested in the crook of his elbow. "Your wolf is very pleased," he murmured as they walked down the hallway. "Yours?" "Insufferable," he admitted. "He's been convinced since yesterday that you're the greatest thing that ever happened to us, and he wants me to throw you over my shoulder and carry you off to our den immediately." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. That would be quite a sight. The Alpha King kidnapping his pregnant mate. "Don't tempt me." But his tone was light, teasing in a way that eased some of the tension coiled in her chest. They descended a grand staircase, and Alara tried not to gawk at the opulence surrounding her. Rich carpets, gleaming wood, paintings that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. This was Dante's world, power and wealth and authority that stretched across the entire kingdom. And somehow, impossibly, she was supposed to fit into it. The breakfast room proved to be smaller and more intimate than she expected, with windows overlooking gardens that sparkled with rain. A table was set for two, laden with enough food to feed a dozen people: fresh bread, butter, jam, eggs prepared 3 different ways, fruit that must have cost a fortune this time of year, hot tea and cold juice. Dante pulled out her chair personally, waiting until she was seated before taking his own place across from her. He didn't pile his plate immediately, instead watching as she surveyed the offerings with barely concealed hunger. "Take whatever you want," he said quietly. "All of it, if it pleases you. I want to see you eat until you're satisfied." The bluntness of his desire to provide for her, to see her fed and cared for, made emotion clog her throat. She reached for the bread with trembling hands, tearing off a piece and spreading it with butter that melted on contact. The first bite was heaven. The second was transcendent. She hadn't realized how hungry she'd been until food touched her tongue. Real food, not the scraps she'd been surviving on. Dante watched her eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. His golden eyes tracked every bite, satisfaction radiating through the bond as she consumed eggs and fruit and more bread than was probably polite. "Better?" he asked when she finally slowed. "Much." She pressed a hand to her belly where the baby was kicking enthusiastically. "Someone else approves too." His gaze dropped to where her hand rested, something hungry and possessive flickering across his face before he controlled it. "The child as well?" "Active, growing. The midwife said everything was developing normally before." She stopped, the memories of her banishment rushing back. "Before they cast you out based on lies," Dante finished, his voice going hard. "Tell me their names, Alara. Tell me who accused you." She shook her head. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from every line of his body. "Someone hurt you. Someone took everything from you and left you to suffer. That matters to me." "Why?" The question burst from her. "Why do you care so much? You don't know me. The bond. It's just fate. Just the moon goddess playing games with our lives. That doesn't mean you owe me anything." Dante was silent for a long moment, his scarred fingers drumming once against the table. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough with emotion. "Do you know what the prophecy says about me? The one every wolf in this kingdom whispers when they think I can't hear?" She shook her head. Though she'd heard rumors. Everyone had heard rumors about the Alpha King. "It says that I'm cursed, that my true mate will be my destruction, that our bond will unleash something dark and terrible that will tear the kingdom apart." His laugh was bitter. "For 32 years I've avoided claiming anyone, refused every match, rejected every potential bond, because I believed that prophecy. I believed that loving someone would damn us all." Ilara's breath caught. "And now? Now I've met you." His golden eyes blazed. "And I don't care what the prophecy says. I don't care if binding myself to you brings the kingdom to its knees. You're mine, Ilara. Mine to protect. Mine to provide for. Mine to—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Mine. And I will tear apart anyone who tries to harm you again." The ferocity in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it made her wolf surge forward with approval, made the bond between them flare hot and bright. Before she could respond, the door to the breakfast room opened. A man entered, older, distinguished, with silver threading through his dark hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He stopped short when he saw Alara, his expression flickering through surprise and calculation before settling into careful neutrality. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing to Dante, "I apologize for the intrusion. I wasn't aware you had company." "Beta Marcus." Dante's voice went cold and Alara's blood froze at the name. "This is hardly an intrusion since you entered without being announced. State your business." "Marcus." Her wolf snarled with sudden recognition, same scent, same blood, and the truth hit her like a physical blow. The silver threading through Beta Marcus's dark hair, the set of his jaw, the cold calculation in his eyes. This was not just another Marcus. This was family. Uncle to the man who'd seduced and abandoned her. The resemblance was unmistakable now that she looked for it, and suddenly Marcus Silvermane's convenient disappearance the night of Catherine's death made terrible sense. The beta's eyes fixed on Alara with sharp interest, and she saw recognition flicker there too. He knew exactly who she was. I came to discuss the council meeting this afternoon, but perhaps we should speak privately if you have guests. The pause before guests was deliberate, dismissive. Alara felt herself shrinking under his regard, the familiar shame of being judged and found wanting rising up to choke her. But Dante stood, his full height and power suddenly filling the room with crackling tension. Lady Alara is not a guest, she is my mate, and you will address her with the respect due to your future Luna Queen. Is that understood? Marcus's eyes widened fractionally. Your mate? Your Majesty? But the prophecy? The prophecy is no concern of yours. Dante's voice could have cut glass. Now state your business or leave us. The beta's gaze flicked between them, something calculating and cold moving behind his eyes. Of course. Forgive me, my lady. He bowed to Alara, the gesture technically correct but empty of genuine respect. Welcome to the palace. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other. The way he said it made Alara's skin crawl. Her wolf, which had been contentedly full and sleepy, suddenly stood at attention, hackles raised. Danger, the creature growled. Threat. Wrong. Marcus turned back to Dante. The council is concerned about recent developments regarding the healing temple. There are questions about the investigation into Luna Catherine's death that require your attention. Alara's world tilted. Luna Catherine, the woman she'd been accused of poisoning, the reason she'd lost everything. What kind of questions? Dante's tone was dangerously soft. Well, with the accused healer's disgrace and the temple's closure, there are those who wonder if justice was truly served. Marcus's eyes slid to Alara with predatory intent. Some believe the woman condemned was merely a scapegoat, that the real culprit walks free among us still. The accusation hung in the air, barely veiled. Alara felt the blood drain from her face. He was twisting the narrative, making it seem like doubt about her guilt meant doubt about justice, when in truth, she'd been innocent all along. The familiar panic of being trapped in someone else's lies rose up to strangle her, but Dante moved between her and Marcus like a wall of muscle and fury. The investigation was thorough. The council rendered judgment. If there are new concerns, they can bring evidence to me directly rather than spreading insinuation through my beta. Of course, Your Majesty. Marcus bowed again. I merely report what I've heard. The council meets at 2 o'clock if you wish to address these matters personally. When he finally left, Alara realized she was shaking. The food she'd eaten sat heavy in her stomach, threatening to come back up. Breathe, Dante said, suddenly crouching beside her chair. Alara, breathe, he can't hurt you. But that wasn't true, was it? Marcus. Not her Marcus, but this Marcus. This beta, with cold eyes and calculated words, had just laid the groundwork for destroying her all over again. Had reminded the kingdom that someone was blamed for Luna Catherine's death. Had planted seeds of doubt about whether justice had truly been served. He knows, she whispered. He knows I was the one accused. And he'll learn that you were innocent, that you were framed by someone else. Dante's hands hovered near her shoulders, not quite touching. I'll make the council see the truth. How? She looked at him through burning eyes. I have no proof. No evidence. Just my word against whoever wanted me destroyed. Then we'll find proof. His voice was absolute, unshakable. We'll uncover who really killed Catherine and her child, and we'll make them pay for what they did to you. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in his power and authority and the bond that tied them together. But she'd trusted before, and it had cost her everything. The baby kicked hard against her palm, a reminder of just how much she still had to lose. The council chamber was a cavern of dark wood and shadows, where torchlight flickered off weapons mounted on stone walls like promises of violence. Ilara stood beside Dante's throne, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly, as 40 pairs of eyes fixed on her with varying degrees of suspicion, contempt, and calculation. The baby kicked hard against her palm, as if sensing her fear. Beta Marcus stood at the center of the chamber floor, his distinguished features arranged in an expression of grave concern that didn't reach his cold eyes. Behind him, a cluster of noble wolves, Lords Grayson, Blackwood, and Thornfield, watched with barely concealed satisfaction. They'd been whispering poison about her since dawn, spreading doubt through the pack bonds like rot through wood. "Your Majesty," Marcus began, his voice carrying through the chamber with practiced authority. "The Council has gathered evidence that must be addressed before we can accept Lady Alara as our Luna." He gestured to a servant, who carried forward a small wooden box. These were found in Lady Alara's chambers, wolfsbane extract and silver powder, the same substances used to poison Luna Catherine. Alara's blood turned to ice. Her chambers. The west wing where Dante had promised she'd be safe, where no one entered without permission. Her wolf snarled with sudden understanding, betrayal, lies, trap, and the bond between her and Dante flared hot with his fury. "Impossible," Dante growled, rising from his throne with lethal grace. "Those chambers are protected by my personal guard. No one enters without my knowledge." "Perhaps your Majesty's judgment has been compromised." Lord Grayson stepped forward, his jowled face flushed with false courage. "The prophecy speaks clearly. Your true mate will bring forth your destructive power, will make you the monster the moon goddess warned against. We cannot allow this woman to endanger the kingdom." A rumble of agreement moved through certain factions of the council. Ilara felt the weight of their condemnation pressing against her chest, stealing her breath. She'd been here before, standing accused, watching people she'd trusted turn their backs, feeling the ground crumble beneath her feet. "The prophecy is being fulfilled even now," Marcus continued smoothly. "Look at how His Majesty has changed since this woman arrived, how he's abandoned protocol, dismissed our concerns, isolated himself from his advisors. These are not the actions of a rational king, but of a man ensorcelled." "Choose your next words carefully, Marcus." Dante's voice dropped to something inhuman, something that made the torches flicker and the very stones of the chamber seem to hold their breath. His eyes blazed full gold, and the scars on his face pulsed with silver light that spoke of barely leashed power. "You're accusing me of weakness in front of my entire council." "I'm trying to protect you, Your Majesty." Marcus spread his hands in a gesture of false supplication. "As I failed to protect Luna Catherine, as I failed to see the threat until it was too late." His gaze cut to Alara with surgical precision. Lady Alara was the last person to treat Luna Catherine before she fell ill. Lady Alara who fled the healing temple the night Catherine died. Lady Alara who now carries a child of suspicious origin and has ensnared our Alpha King with convenient claims of a mate bond. The words hit like physical blows. Alara felt herself shrinking, felt the old shame and helplessness rising up to choke her. Her fingers dug into her belly as the baby kicked again, harder, as if the child could sense her distress. "Evidence can be planted," Dante snarled. "Accusations can be fabricated. You have no proof. We have testimony." Lord Blackwood produced a scroll, his thin lips curved in satisfaction. "From healer Mariah, who served with Lady Alara at the temple. She swears that Alara possessed both wolfsbane and silver powder, that she spoke of resentment toward Luna Catherine for her elevated position." Lies. All lies. Alara had never resented Catherine, had loved the gentle Luna like a sister, had mourned her death with genuine grief. But healer Mariah had always been jealous of Alara's stronger gift, had always looked for ways to undermine her. The council chamber erupted in heated discussion. Some defended Dante's choice, but more voices rose in condemnation. Through the bond, Alara felt Dante's rage building like a summer storm, felt his wolf clawing at his control with the need to protect her, to destroy anyone who threatened what was his. And that's exactly what they wanted, she realized with sudden, terrible clarity. They wanted him to lose control, to prove the prophecy true, to become the monster they feared. Marcus wasn't trying to protect the kingdom from her. He was trying to use her to break their Alpha King. Enough. The word cracked through the chamber like thunder, and suddenly the debate ceased. Not because Dante had spoken, but because Alara had. She stepped forward from the throne's shadow, her spine straightening despite the fear that threatened to buckle her knees. Her hand remained on her belly, but she raised her chin with the dignity that had made the Alpha King stop his motorcade in the rain. You want proof? Her voice shook slightly, but she forced herself to continue. You want to know the truth about who poisoned Luna Catherine? Ilara, don't. Dante moved toward her, but she raised her free hand, stopping him. Through their bond, she sent a pulse of certainty, of trust, of please, let me do this. I was the temple's strongest healer, she said, addressing the council directly. My gift allowed me to see the flow of life and death, to sense corruption in the blood, to trace magical signatures through flesh and bone. She looked at Marcus, at his careful mask of concern, and her wolf bared its teeth with absolute knowledge. When I examined Luna Catherine, I felt the poison in her system, but I also felt something else, the magical signature of who had administered it. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, calculation. I have been too afraid to use my gift since that night, Ilara continued, too broken by accusations and loss. But I will not hide anymore. I will not let innocent people suffer for crimes they didn't commit. She walked to the center of the chamber floor, her pregnant belly making her movements awkward but no less determined. This palace is old stone, quarried from the heart of the kingdom. Stone remembers. Stone holds echoes of every life that has touched it, every death that has stained it. She knelt slowly, ignoring the protest from her body, and pressed both palms flat against the cold marble. Her wolf surged forward with approval. Yes, show them, prove them wrong, protect our mate. And Alara opened herself to her gift for the first time in months. The power that flooded through her was overwhelming. She gasped as her consciousness expanded outward, sinking into the stone like water into parched earth. The marble had witnessed centuries of pack history, held fragments of thousands of lives within its crystalline structure. She pushed deeper, searching for the specific resonance she needed. There, Luna Catherine's magical signature, still lingering in the stone like the ghost of perfume. Ilara followed it backward through time, through the palace's memory of that terrible night. She saw Catherine in her chambers, saw the Luna pressing a hand to her belly with joy and fear mingled on her beautiful face. Saw a figure entering with a tray of tea. No, Marcus said sharply. This is a trick. Silence, Dante commanded, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Let her finish. Ilara pulled the memory from the stone and channeled it outward, projecting what she saw into the air above her head like smoke given form. The council watched in stunned silence as Catherine's ghost image drank the poisoned tea, as her face twisted in sudden agony, as she collapsed to the floor with her hands clutching her belly. And there, kneeling beside the dying Luna with an expression of cold satisfaction, was Beta Marcus. The projection showed him checking her pulse, ensuring she was truly dead, then carefully placing a vial in the folds of Alara's healer robes that hung on a nearby chair. Planting evidence, framing her for murder. That's not... Marcus started, but his voice faltered as the council turned on him with dawning horror. Alara wasn't finished. She pulled forth more memories, showing Marcus meeting in shadows with Lords Grayson, Blackwood, and Thornfield. showing him whispering poison about Dante's prophesied fate, building alliances against the Alpha King. And then, her breath caught, showing a younger man with familiar features receiving instructions from Beta Marcus, Marcus Silvermane. His nephew. Seduce the healer, the Beta had said in the memory. Make her trust you. When the time comes, she'll make the perfect scapegoat. The stone showed Silvermane's subsequent flight from the territory. Gold coins pressed into his palm by his uncle, his mission accomplished. When she finally released the stone and collapsed backward, gasping, every eye in the chamber blazed with fury directed at the Beta who had betrayed them all. You murdered my Luna, someone whispered. Lord Ashford, Alara realized dimly, an older man who had been Catherine's uncle. You killed her and her child. You let an innocent healer take the blame. Marcus's composure held for one more heartbeat, the mask of a master manipulator refusing to crack. This is a trick, he said smoothly, backing toward the chamber doors. Stone magic can be fabricated. The healer is clearly using dark arts to... The doors are sealed, Dante said quietly. You're not leaving this chamber, Marcus. The Beta's retreat halted. His eyes darted to the guards blocking every exit, to the council members who had been his allies now watching him with dawning horror. For a moment, Alara saw calculation flash across his face, weighing options, searching for an escape, a lie, a way out. Then his gaze landed on her pregnant belly, and something cold and desperate replaced the calculation. If I'm to die anyway, he snarled, all pretense finally falling away, I'll at least take the prophecy's instrument with me. He rounded on Alara with decades of suppressed venom. You'll make him the monster that destroys this kingdom. Catherine was weak, but you're worse. I should have killed you when I had the chance. He moved with supernatural speed, shifting mid-lunge into a massive gray wolf with fangs bared, aimed directly at Alara's throat, not to escape, but to destroy what he hated most. But Dante was faster. The Alpha King's hand closed around Marcus's throat mid-leap, slamming him to the marble floor with bone-cracking force. The impact shook the entire chamber, sent torches guttering and weapons rattling against stone. Dante's eyes blazed pure molten gold, and his own wolf surged forward with such power that the very air seemed to shudder around him. You poisoned your Luna, Dante snarled, each word punctuated by Marcus's struggles weakening, his claws extended, razor-sharp and glowing with silver light. You framed my mate. You turned my counsel against me. You threatened what is mine. His voice dropped to something that was more growl than speech, something that made even the boldest warriors step back. What possible reason could I have to let you live? Marcus gasped for air, his gray wolf form flickering back to human as his strength failed. Blood trickled from his mouth, but he managed a broken laugh. The prophecy, he choked out, says she'll destroy you. She'll make you the monster you fear. She already has, Dante said quietly, and the truth in his voice made Alara's heart clench. And I have never been more whole. His claws sank into Marcus's throat in one swift motion. The Beta's final scream echoed through the chamber before his body convulsed and began to crumble, turning to ash as the false bonds he'd formed with pack members burned away in the face of his treachery. Within seconds, nothing remained but gray dust on pristine marble. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Dante turned to the lords who had conspired with Marcus. They pressed against the far wall like cornered prey, their earlier arrogance transformed to primal terror. You have one chance, the Alpha King said softly. Explain why I shouldn't do the same to you. We didn't know, Lord Grayson gasped. We thought, he convinced us. That murdering your Luna was acceptable? That framing an innocent healer was justified? Power crackled around Dante like visible lightning. You are banished. All of you. Take your families and leave this kingdom by sunset tomorrow. If I ever see your faces again, I will finish what I started here. They fled without another word, scrambling over each other in their desperation to escape. The rest of the council remained frozen, watching their Alpha King with a mixture of awe and something that might have been relief. Dante didn't acknowledge them. He crossed to Alara in 3 long strides and carefully gathered her into his arms, lifting her from the floor with such gentleness that tears sprang to her eyes. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you, love. You're safe now." Through their bond flooded such fierce pride and devotion that it stole her breath. He was so warm, so solid, and she was so very tired. The use of her power after months of dormancy had drained her completely. "The council requires," someone began tentatively. "The council is dismissed," Dante said without looking away from Alara's face. "We will reconvene when my mate has rested and recovered from defending herself against accusations she should never have faced. Is that understood?" A chorus of, "Yes, Your Majesty," followed them as he carried her from the chamber. The walk back to her chambers, no, to their chambers, because there was no more separation, no more pretending they were anything but mates, passed in a blur of warm torchlight and whispered endearments. Dante took her to his private rooms, to the massive bed piled with furs that smelled of pine and musk and safety. He laid her down with infinite care, then knelt beside the bed, with his scarred face level with hers. "You were magnificent," he said hoarsely. "The way you stood before them, the way you used your power to show the truth. I have never seen anything more beautiful." Alara reached out with a trembling hand to trace the scars that marked him. "I couldn't let them win, couldn't let them turn you into the monster they feared, couldn't let them take away the only good thing I've found in this nightmare." His eyes flashed gold, and his hand came up to cover hers against his face. "Ilara, my mate, my everything." His voice dropped to something raw and vulnerable. "I need to ask you something, and you can say no. You can take all the time you need. But I'm not sure I can survive another day without—" "Yes," she whispered, because she knew what he was asking. Had known since the moment the bond snapped into place between them, had been waiting for this with equal parts terror and desperate longing. "You don't know what I was going to say," he said, but hope and hunger blazed in his expression. "You want to complete the bond. To mark me as yours." She sat up slowly, wincing slightly at the pull in her lower back. "And I want the same thing. I want to mark you, to claim you, to never again doubt that I have a place in this world." Dante's breath caught. "The baby. I don't want to hurt—" "The baby is fine," the healer said, "as long as I'm careful." She pulled him up onto the bed beside her, her fingers finding the buttons of his formal tunic. "I need this, Dante. Need to feel complete. Need to know that no one can ever take you from me." His hands covered hers, stilling her movements. "If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be my Luna Queen. You'll be bound to me for the rest of our lives. You'll share in my power and my fate, whatever that may be." He searched her face desperately. "Are you certain? After everything you've suffered, everything you've lost—" "I'm certain," she said firmly. "I've never been more certain of anything." She tilted her head, baring her throat in the ancient gesture of trust and submission. The vulnerability of it made her wolf sing with rightness, made the bond between them flare so bright she could feel it in her bones. Dante made a sound between a groan and a prayer. His lips found the junction of her neck and shoulder, the exact spot where a mating mark would settle. "Mine," he breathed against her skin. "You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, and the whole world can burn before I let anything harm you again." "Then make me yours," Alara whispered. "Please." His teeth sank into her throat in one swift, decisive motion. The pain was immediate and shocking, a burning lance that made her cry out and arch against him. But even as the hurt registered, it was transforming into something else entirely. Pleasure flooded through the mark, spreading from the wound like liquid fire through her veins. She felt his wolf claiming hers, felt the bond settling into place with thunderous certainty. Through their connection poured everything he felt for her. His devotion, his wonder, his fierce protective instinct, his absolute conviction that she was the missing piece of his soul. She experienced his loneliness through the years before they met. The hollow ache of waiting for someone who might never come. She felt his fear when he first caught her scent. His terror that the prophecy would prove true and he would destroy her. And underneath it all, so powerful it made her weep. Love. Pure, unconditional, eternal love. When he finally released her throat, she was shaking with the force of it. The mark pulsed with heat and light, and she knew without looking that it would scar, would mark her forever as his. Your turn, she managed to gasp out. Need to claim you too. Dante's eyes widened slightly, then he tilted his head with a look of such vulnerable trust that it broke something open in her chest. No one had ever trusted her like this. No one had ever given themselves so completely. She pulled him down until she could reach the thick muscle of his shoulder, right where his neck met his body. Her wolf guided her, showed her exactly where to bite. Her teeth, smaller than his, more delicate, still broke skin easily. The taste of his blood on her tongue was copper and pine and power. His groan was guttural, animalistic. His hands fisted in the furs beneath them as she marked him, as she poured her own soul into the bond. He felt her fear transform to strength, felt her determination to protect what was hers, felt her slowly blooming hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have happiness again. And when the bond snapped fully into place, completed by both marks, the force of it shook them to their cores. The chamber filled with golden light that seemed to emanate from their skin. The mate bond became a visible thing for a heartbeat, a thread of pure moonlight connecting their hearts, their souls, their fates. The prophecy rewrote itself around their connection, and Alara understood with sudden clarity what it had always meant. She would bring forth his destructive power, but not to harm the kingdom, to protect it, to defend what was theirs with the combined strength of both their wolves, both their gifts, both their unbreakable hearts. Mine, Dante breathed against her mouth, kissing her with desperate reverence. My mate, my Luna, my love. Yours, Alara answered, and finally, the word felt like truth instead of terror. And you're mine, my mate, my alpha, my home. They held each other as the bond settled, as the mark stopped burning and began to heal. The baby kicked between them, and Dante's hand joined Alara's on her belly with such tenderness it made her cry. We're whole now, he murmured, all three of us, complete. She buried her face in his chest and let herself believe it. The council formally recognized Alara as Luna Queen 3 days later, in a ceremony that brought Pax from across the kingdom to witness. She stood beside Dante wearing silver silk that accommodated her rounded belly, the mating mark visible on her throat like a brand of ownership she wore with pride. Lord Ashford approached after the ceremony, his weathered face creased with emotion. Lady Alara, Your Majesty, I must apologize. We should have believed you about Catherine, should have questioned Marcus's accusations. You were grieving, Alara said gently, taking his hand. And he was convincing. All that matters is that the truth came to light. Catherine would have loved you, he said, tears gathering in his eyes. Would have been so happy to know Dante found his true mate. The healing temple reopened under Alara's guidance a week later. She trained new healers and worked to clear the names of others who had been falsely accused. Healer Mariah confessed under questioning that Marcus had threatened her family to force her testimony. She was pardoned and reinstated. 2 months passed in relative peace. Ilara's belly grew round and full, and Dante became increasingly protective as her due date approached. He growled at anyone who got too close, insisted on carrying her upstairs, and slept with one hand on her stomach every night. "You're being ridiculous," she told him fondly when he snarled at a servant who'd brought the wrong tea. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass." "You're carrying something infinitely precious," he countered, pulling her against his chest. "Forgive me for wanting to protect it." The baby came on the first night of the full moon, in a labor that was mercifully short. Alara gripped Dante's hand hard enough to bruise as the healers worked, and when the first cry pierced the air, she sobbed with relief. "A daughter," the head healer announced, placing the squalling infant on Alara's chest, healthy and strong. Alara stared down at the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the little fingers that grasped instinctively at air. "She's perfect," she breathed. Then the baby opened her eyes, soft brown like autumn leaves. Marcus Silvermane's eyes. The evidence of her conception, of the betrayal that had nearly destroyed Alara's life, staring up at her from her daughter's innocent face. Alara's breath caught. The old shame tried to rise, tried to taint this perfect moment. But Dante leaned over them both, and when he spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. "She's beautiful. She's absolutely beautiful." "She has his eyes," Ilara whispered, the words dragged out of her. "Marcus's—" "She has your courage," Dante interrupted gently. "Your resilience. Your strength." He reached out with one scarred finger to touch the baby's cheek, and the infant turned toward him instinctively, seeking warmth. "And she has my heart. Completely. From this moment forward, she is mine, not because of blood, but because of love. Because you trusted me enough to let me be her father." Tears spilled down Alara's cheeks. "You don't have to. I want to." His golden eyes blazed with fierce certainty. "I told you the day we met. Any child you carry is under my protection. I meant it then. I mean it more now." He gathered them both into his arms, his face buried in Alara's hair as his shoulders shook. "My girls. My family. My everything. Biology doesn't make a father, Ilara. Love does. Choice does. And I choose her. I choose you both." They named her Catherine, after the Luna who had been murdered, whose death had inadvertently brought Ilara and Dante together. It felt right. A way of honoring the past while building toward the future. 6 months later, Ilara stood in the palace gardens watching Catherine toddle through spring flowers under the watchful eye of her doting father. Her hand rested on her belly where their second child grew, confirmed by the healers just that morning. "You're smiling," Dante observed, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around her waist. "Really smiling. Not the sad ghost of one you used to give me." "I have a lot to smile about," she said, leaning back against his solid warmth. "A mate who loves me, a daughter who's perfect, another baby on the way, a kingdom that accepts me, a purpose in the healing temple." She turned in his arms to face him. "You asked me once to smile for you. Just once, as payment for clearing my debts." "I remember." His scarred fingers traced her cheek with infinite gentleness. "You looked so lost in that rain. I would have paid anything just to see a hint of joy in your eyes. You gave me more than that." She kissed him softly. "You gave me a reason to smile every day for the rest of my life. You gave me everything." Catherine squealed with delight, having discovered a butterfly. Dante scooped her up with a laugh, and Alara's heart felt so full she thought it might burst. From drowning in debt and accusations to this, to family, to love, to hope. The prophecy had been right after all. She had brought forth his destructive power, but used it to destroy those who would harm them, to protect rather than terrorize. Together they were stronger than either could have been alone. And as Catherine babbled happily about her butterfly and Dante pressed a kiss to Ilara's temple, The future stretched out before them, bright and unafraid. They had found their happily ever after against impossible odds, had turned pain into joy, accusations into vindication, debts into devotion. And every day Alara smiled, freely, genuinely, eternally grateful for the scarred Alpha King who had stopped his motorcade in the rain for a pregnant woman's dignity, who had paid her debts asking only for one smile. She'd given him that and so much more, had given him her heart, her trust, her forever. And he had given her the same in return: home, pack, family, love. Everything she'd thought she'd lost forever returned 100-fold. The moon goddess had been kind after all.